So after the Columbia accident, the way the shuttle program was to move forward was different, right? They required to have another shuttle on the pad ready to go to rescue the first shuttle of the primary mission, and we had to have the ability on board the space station to actually serve as a safe haven for the shuttle crew, to allow them a safe haven to stay until the rescue shuttle could come up and rescue them. So that had big impacts on our program. One, we had to have enough resources, enough capacity on board our vehicle on board the International Space Station to handle 7 additional bodies, which is a huge deal. Station was not sized for that magnitude. And we were in the process of trying to grow from a 3-person crew to a 7-person crew, or to a 6-person crew, which would mean maximum we could have a size of 7 plus 6, 13 people on board. So we could have quite a few people, which would tax the environmental control and life support systems. It could tax the amount of food and the amount of water on board. Plus, we had to manage all those resources. And so we endeavored to do that. It had a significant impact because we had to keep these cache of stores on board. We always had to manage that actively. We were in a great place that we had enough stores on board. We had the capacity to store them, but we had to actively manage them. And then, of course, when we grew from a 3-person crew to a 6-person crew, that added additional tax. Eventually, we got to the point where we no longer. It also required, I should say, that the shuttle had the flights spaced close together, which was a problem too. And so we ultimately got to the point where we could space the shuttle flights a little longer. We could manage the stores by actually having the ability to fly a Progress or another resupply vehicle in that interim, and still we knew we had a very successful plan to keep the shuttle crew safe and healthy until a rescue shuttle could come up. All that worked perfectly up until the very last flight. Of course, you get to the point where you say, well, the last flight's going to fly. Do you prepare a rescue flight for that vehicle? And in this case, we did not. We finally got to the point where we actually decided to go look at flying the shuttle crew members down on Soyuz vehicles if in the event that the last shuttle flight had some damage and could not safely return the crew. We actually worked with our Russian partners to create this plan and had a successful plan, although I'll tell you that the longest staying shuttle crew member would have to stay on board the International Space Station an additional year before they could get a ride home. But worked out that plan, worked with our partners, and thankfully we didn't have to execute that plan. Okay? So some have asked, should we have had a rescue flight, or this mentality of having a rescue flight all along in the International Space Station program? Should we have always had a rescue shuttle on the pad to rescue the crew members on the first flight? And I would tell you that the real reason for that is risk assessment and then risk mitigation. Up to the Columbia accident, our assessment, and I say ours, I'm not talking about in the International Space Station program, I'm talking about in NASA and the shuttle, really the nation. Our assessment was that the risk of losing a shuttle once it's on orbit, from on orbit down through landing, was small. And therefore it didn't warrant the expenditure of resources to always have another shuttle on the pad ready to go. And so some would say, well, should we do that? Should we have done that? And should we do that in future programs? And I would say it's really back to that same idea, risk assessment. What is the risk, and how should we deploy our resources to actively manage all the risks on the program, not just this one risk? So what we did wrong at that point in time was we did not understand completely the risk to the shuttle in this ascent debris environment, to the foam shedding off of the tank and other sources of debris, and what it could mean to a shuttle being able to safely return to Earth and land. And so we didn't understand that risk, and so we weren't mitigating it appropriately. When we returned to flight, we understood that risk significantly better. Plus, we'd taken some additional mitigation steps to reduce that risk. And therefore, because we saw it as a much higher risk, then we took the I would say, enormous expenditures to have a rescue shuttle there. That's a significant resource hit both to the shuttle program and to the International Space Station program. In the future, I wouldn't just jump to that conclusion, because when you're spending money on resolving this risk or mitigating this particular risk, there are dozens, perhaps other risks that might be more significant that you are not deploying resources. Resources are always precious, and therefore you have to deploy them to the highest risk. So I would recommend that programs in the future, again, assess all their risks and decide how best to do that. The key is continually going back and looking at those risks, even the ones that are not your number one risk, to see if did I understand them correctly. Have they grown over time? Is our understanding of those changed? Has other factors in the environment changed that would change my overall risk assessment and where I would deploy my resources? But I wouldn't always plan on having a rescue flight for humans sitting there on the pad. I don't think that's probably the best use of our resources. And as we go on to exploration, when you're talking about launching a huge rocket like the Space Launch System with an Orion capsule on board, there's only one launch pad. Our ability to build rockets of that size and Orions of that size is limited, and even our ability to fly a rescue flight would be nearly impossible. So, or prohibitively expensive. So again, we need to understand those risks and then deploy our resources appropriately. My sense is for exploration, that won't be having a rescue flight sitting on the pad, but that'll be for the future generations to decide.